At 3:58 on May 10, 1940, a French Four headquarters is situated at Meuse, along the Meuse River. The late spring chill is biting and a fine, gritty drizzle is falling. A dense white fog clings to the barbed wire and bunker roofs. South of the river, the Ardennes clay is saturated with water and carries a heavy scent of silt. The wind whips through the valley, causing a signal flag to snap with a rapid, urgent pulse. Inside the dugout, General Huntsiger is bent over a map, ruler in hand. French blue arrows delineate a broad arc, moving up into Belgium toward Namur, then curving back to Meuse. This represents the Dilbreda Plan, a strategy to push the best French and British armies north to confront and halt the German advance far from French soil. Nearly all the first-rate divisions have already been deployed in that direction, as modern campaign accounts described. On the map, the Ardennes region appears as a solid, dark green block, a seemingly impenetrable forest wall. Throughout the 1930s, the prevailing wisdom held that tanks cannot pass through here quickly, as numerous sources indicate. Huntsiger himself shares this belief. Consequently, the French defense around Sedan and along the Meuse is thinly stretched, manned by reserve units, equipped with fewer guns, and relying on field telephone lines strung through woods that haven't been thoroughly secured. A mental block has translated into a physical gap in their defenses. Unbeknownst to them, at this very hour, German columns are already advancing through that forest. Fall Gelb, the German plan, is proceeding precisely on schedule. Panzer divisions snake through the trees, their radios crackling with commands. As Stuka bombers begin to assemble, Blitzkrieg represents a tempo of warfare that France has never experienced. France still operates on a rhythm of line, firepower, prepared counterattack, a heavy, ponderous rhythm, slow to adapt. Urgent news arrives from the Netherlands and Belgium. German parachutists have seized bridges and airfields, and borders have been breached. The French and British armies accelerate their advance north exactly as planned, with every element moving in one direction. Almost no one considers the alternative, the path less expected. 12:46 on May 12th, on the east bank opposite Sedan. The sky is a dully gray. The rain has subsided, but a thin veil of river vapor hangs in the air. On the slopes, German artillery is moving into position. 105mm Luft H-18 howitzers are being deployed, trails dropped, and bearings set. These guns, with a caliber 105mm and a maximum range of approximately 6 kilometers, can sustain a rate of fire of around 4 to 6 rounds per minute. Instead of prolonged, drawn-out bombardment, they concentrate their fire for 15 to 20 minutes on specific French targets, machine gun nests, observation posts, and telephone nodes. Immediately following this concentrated artillery barrage, Stuka bombers swoop down, dropping 250 kilograms bombs on the same previously softened positions. This coordinated attack is the initial blow aimed at the French nervous system. A defense predicated on telephone communication and sequential orders falters, losing its tempo. Signal pits are buried. Observers are dislodged from their perches. A company huddled inside a river bunker hears the terrifying wail of Jericho's sirens overhead, followed only by the gritty rasp of concrete dust filtering into their ears. They survive, but they are cut off in the larger strategic picture. Blitzkrieg does not require the annihilation of every soldier. Its goal is to disorient and isolate, to make the enemy lose their sense of location within the overall battle. French 25mm Hotchkiss anti-tank guns are hastily positioned along the field edges. These are small-caliber guns, manned by thin crews. While they can penetrate German armor at close range, the post-penetration effect is often limited. Many German tanks continue to operate even after being hit. A gunner spots a Panzer II emerging from the woods and fires. The round pierces a thin armor plate, creating sparks inside the tank. The tank wobbles momentarily, but continues to advance. He fires again. Only after the third hit does it finally stall. But behind it, the column stretches endlessly. Another critical mismatch is revealed: concentration versus scattering. France possesses excellent tanks. The Char B-1 bis, weighing between 28 to 32 tons, boasts armor up to 60 millimeters thick, a hull-mounted 75mm gun for support, and a turreted 47mm SA-35 for engaging other tanks. 1B1 Bis appears near Bolson, moving slowly but appearing indomitable. The driver peers through a narrow slit, following voice commands from the infantry. However, B1 Bis units are typically dispersed in small groups to reinforce local defenses, rather than being massed into a mobile, powerful armored fist like the German Panzer divisions, as doctrinal studies have noted. Thus, even when individual tanks are superior, they rarely generate a campaign-level impact. They're like heavy stones scattered on a road, while Germany unleashes a flood. Back in Mezieres, telephone lines are severed, reconnected, and then severed again. Huntziger receives fragmented, unreliable reports. Pontoon bridges, too many Stukas. 55th Division collapsing. He slams his palm on the table, not out of fear, but out of frustration from the lack of clear information. When information arrives hours late, every planned counterattack dies on paper, rendered obsolete before it can be executed. A young French lieutenant named Jean Fictional sits in a Meuse observation dugout, his hands trembling from the shock waves of the explosions. He opens his wallet and glances at a wedding photo. His wife smiles radiantly in white in front of a small church in Reims. He seeks a moment of reassurance, then quickly shoves it back as the order arrives. Hold the bank! He hears hold, but not where. That is the most overwhelming feeling of this day. The lack of context, the uncertainty. France does not lack courage. It lacks a system, a rhythm, suited to the new, rapid tempo of war. The Dil Breda plan pulls the best forces north, leaving the Ardennes thinly defended. A command system relying on sequential telephone orders reacts too slowly when those lines are cut. German air power dominates the immediate battle, destroying information nodes and shattering morale. And French tanks, despite their individual strength, are scattered to support infantry instead of being massed for strategic maneuver. The first crest of the German wave rises on the Meuse. Germany approaches with new tempo, while France prepares with an old one. The gap does not instantly destroy France, but it throws the entire nation off balance. Once that balance is lost in a high-speed war, the rest is simply a matter of time, a descent into inevitable collapse. 1857, on May 13th, 1940, the Marfi Heights south of Sedan. Dusk arrives prematurely under a thick blanket of clouds. Meuse mist rises like cold smoke. The limestone soil is slick and treacherous. Grass is churned into a morass of black mud. After a day of relentless pounding by hundreds of Stuka and bomber sorties, the French line is vibrating like a string stretched to its breaking point. Inside concrete shelters, French gunners sit amidst piles of spent shell casings. Their ears are ringing with a hollow drone. Field telephone cables connecting them to headquarters have been severed since noon, most of them laid in the open and easily targeted by bombing. They still have 75mm and 105mm guns behind them, still have shells, still have men, but they no longer possess the tempo, the information to know where to direct their fire. A young observation lieutenant attempts to use a backup radio set. The signal is weak and distorted. He blurts out, "German tanks are at Bolson." This is inaccurate. German armor has not yet crossed. But in an atmosphere thick with shock and fear, false news spreads faster than verifiable facts. It races through the newly raised companies of the French 55th Division. Historians later refer to this incident as a panic of Bolson. Groups of soldiers abandon their bunkers, leaving behind their guns and positions, fleeing rearward in disarray. Jean Fictional crouches near the river line and witnesses a stream of men retreating. He shouts, "Turn back!" They haven't crossed. But no one listens. Everyone hears the piercing wail of Stuka's sirens echoing in their minds, feels the ground trembling beneath their feet. Jean grabs an older artilleryman by the sleeve, trying to force him to stay. The man stares at Jean as if he is from another world, detached from the reality of the situation. Then he, too, runs, clutching only a pistol and a crust of bread. On the German side, Guderian observes the thinning of the western bank. He immediately orders the crossing to begin. Engineers launch rubber boats into the water, each carrying a few infantrymen armed with MP-3840S and grenades. Artillery provides covering fire. Stukas circle overhead. By 7:30 on May 14th, the first panzers begin crossing pontoon bridges. Prior to this, German armor experiences approximately a 7-hour delay due to bridge jams and remaining French resistance. Those 7 hours represent a critical window of opportunity for a counterattack, an opportunity that France fails to seize. At Mezieres and Laon, the French response is formulated slowly, deliberately. X-Corps is tasked with striking the Bolson, Chihiri axis and cutting off the bridgeheads. However, senior commanders are far removed from the front lines and rely on reports that arrive late and are often incomplete. They hesitate, waiting to confirm whether the Germans have really crossed. By the time confirmation arrives, it is already stale, useless. France's methodical battle doctrine requires a day to assemble a counterattack. Blitzkrieg requires only an afternoon to shatter that assembly line. 1512 on May 15, 1940. The village of Stan, more than 15 kilometers south of Sedan. The sun is blazing hot. Chalk dust hangs thick in the air over the steep lanes. Stan is a small village. Stone houses, a modest church, one main road. But it sits strategically on the road that panzer columns must use to break out, making the village a cork in the bottle of the entire campaign. French Char B-1 bis tanks rumble up the slope. One, named Ure, according to unit records, enters the village. With armor up to 60 millimeters thick, it can withstand numerous lighter hits without penetration, with some sources claiming over 140 strikes in a single engagement. Its turreted 47 millimeters gun rotates slowly, but shoots accurately at a few hundred meters, knocking out Panzer IIIs and IVs one after another. Its hull-mounted 75 millimeters gun fires high explosive rounds into houses, causing walls to collapse like paper. Over the course of days, Stan changes hands repeatedly. Accounts often list well over 10 switches. It is a scene of pure collision. Tanks surge in, infantry follows behind, fire rakes the alleys. Then Stukas dive and scatter everything back into dust. German infantry hides in the rubble, lacking Panzerfaust in 1940, and they rely on 37 millimeters anti-tank guns and satchel charges, crawling close to find vulnerable points. French infantry drops into roadside trenches and throws grenades into cellars. Yet Stan, despite its intense violence, remains an isolated stand. B-1 bis tanks are powerful, but their coordination with infantry is slow, and their turret holds a one-man commander who must simultaneously aim, fire, and command, as technical studies have noted. B-1 bis units enter the fray in small packets, not as a concentrated armored division. They seize the village in the morning only to be pushed out by evening, because support is insufficient and German air power returns relentlessly. Germany adapts within the fight. When thick armor appears, they drag forward 88 millimeters flak guns for direct fire. The 88 can penetrate over 80 millimeters of armor at around 2 kilometers, enough to destroy AB-1 bis if it achieves the right angle. Field guns fire at point-blank range. Stukas nail down tank clusters, preventing them from maneuvering. That adaptation occurs faster than French counterattacks can be organized and executed. Jean reaches the edge of Stan on May 16th with what remains of his platoon. His order is direct and unambiguous. Retake the crossroads. Hold until new orders. He runs through a burning apple orchard, dragging a private with shoulder wound. The private presses a photo into Jean's hand. 2 children standing outside a bakery. If I die, give it to my wife. Jean nods and pockets it. Seconds later, a shell explodes, throwing him into a ditch. When he raises his head, the private is silent, lifeless. The photo is still warm in his palm. From Sedan to Stan, chaos spreads like wildfire through dry grass, not because France lacks guns or tanks, but because it loses its command and control, its rhythm. German air power numbs the information network. False reports trigger the Bolson panic. Counterattacks arrive late because commanders are distant and procedures are cumbersome. Hard points like Stan demonstrate that French spirit and equipment can destroy panzers locally, but they cannot reverse the overall strategic situation when scattered and unsupported. The second crest of the German wave ends with a cold, undeniable truth. The French defensive system collapses faster than the rate of attrition, the sheer killing speed. When you still have guns but no communication, Tanks but no tempo. Soldiers but no common picture. The collapse races ahead of the Panzer tracks. 5:41 on May 20th, 1940. Abbeville on the Somme estuary. Cold, damp air, low clouds skimming over pastureland. Sea mist salty in the throat. Wet cobblestones shine black. A Panzer III halts at a crossroads, its radio antenna trembling in the wind. On the command map, the Red Spear has reached the English Channel. The Sedan corridor has now become a pair of shears, one blade cutting from the Ardennes to the sea. It splits the British, French, Belgian armies in two. North of the cut, the Allies are reeling, retreating. They march into Belgium under the Dill Plan, and now turn back in confusion. Retreat routes and advance routes become intertwined like tangled wire. Trucks jam the roads. Refugees clog the gaps between units. Every road is hunted by Stukas. Men look up at the sky more than they look at maps. In BF headquarters, Lord Gort sees the vice closing. He orders a withdrawal to Dunkirk. It is a matter of survival, not ceremony. French formations on the southern flank attempt to hold the line to cover the escape, establishing defensive positions around Lille, La Bassée, and along the canals. However, the canals are not like the Maginot Line. They are shallow in many stretches, with low banks, making them vulnerable to artillery fire, as numerous sources have noted. 7:12 on May 26, Dunkirk Beach. Lead gray sky, northwest wind snapping, short waves slapping the sand. Smoke from burning ships drifts black across the surf. Lines of soldiers stand silently in long, dark rows. Operation Dynamo begins. Over 338,000 British and French troops are evacuated between May 26th and June 4th, according to standard tallies. On shore, a French captain raises a whistle. 3 short blasts keep the queue from breaking. In his other hand, he holds a letter pulled from a dead soldier's coat. Mother, I'm still at Lille. The ink is blurred with rain and blood. The captain folds it carefully and slides it into his own pocket, a task he refuses to skip before giving the next order. Humans hold on to each other with such small acts while the tide of war threatens to engulf them. German armor is close, but then it pauses. Panzer groups around Dunkirk receive a halt order for several days, with many sources debating the reasons. Marshy ground, fear of tank losses, or high-level strategic decisions. Blitzkrieg bends its own tempo. The Luftwaffe attempts to crush the beaches. But without a final closing layer of ground forces, the pocket retains an escape route. Stukas continue to dive. 250 kilograms bombs explode on piers, and MG-34 fire rakes the sand. Yet each night, small craft continue to lift men away into fog. When the north is drained into the sea, France behind it becomes hollow, undefended. On June 5th, Germany launches Case Red, driving into central and southern France. France attempts to establish a Somme Aisne line. Its 75mm field gun is legendary, firing 15 to 20 rounds per minute. But even fast guns need targets and communications. The enemy advances too quickly, and information still arrives too slowly. Jean is with a battered battalion near Noyon. He receives a handwritten order because radio communication is down. Hold the bridge until 1800 hours. He looks at a wooden span over a narrow stream. He digs a waist-deep pit and sets his MAS-38 to wait. He hears aircraft before he hears shells. Then 105mm rounds crash in bursts coming seconds apart, concentrated on a single bridge. German engineers throw smoke, and infantry slips through the grassy banks. When the smoke clears, the bridge is gone. The order to hold until 1800 hours becomes torn paper within 30 minutes. Across France, defense becomes a series of isolated props. One location has Char B-1 bis tanks that stop panzers. Another location stages a brief, mechanized counterattack, but the props do not connect. They are stones under a waterfall. Water finds the gaps between the stones. On June 14th, Paris falls with minimal fighting within the city. Civilians watch German columns march along the boulevards. A woman hangs a white cloth from her window. She does not cheer, nor does she cry. She looks as if she is watching a flood that chose its course long ago. The French government has fled to Bordeaux and then Vichy. On June 22nd, France signs the armistice at Compiègne. The numbers are staggering. In May, June 1940, Germany suffers approximately 27,000 dead and over 110,000 wounded. The Allies suffer about 73,000 dead, 240,000 wounded, and more than 7 million captured. But more significant than the raw numbers is the speed of collapse. Command systems, plans, and morale disintegrate faster than the rate of attrition. Why does France collapse so rapidly? By now, the answer is as clear as the wet road in Abbeville. Strategy centers on the wrong direction. The Dill Plan pushes the main forces into Belgium, leaving the Ardennes, Sedan sector thinly defended, precisely where Germany attacks. France relies on methodical battle, executed through sequential orders and fixed telephone networks. The Luftwaffe destroys the communication nodes, and slow reaction devolves into paralysis. France possesses fine tanks and guns, but uses its armor in dispersed infantry support packets, not in coordinated operational masses. Germany concentrates and coordinates radio, air, armor as a single unified force. The Northern Encirclement and Dunkirk evacuation, even with many saved, drains much of the best field army, leaving the remainder exhausted in manpower and spirit. Jean retreats toward the Loire in a column of remnants. He stops at a small station. In his pocket, he finds a photo of 2 children that a dying private asked him to deliver. He doesn't know their names. He only knows he must keep it safe. Refugee trains rattle past. Jean understands that war doesn't only break armies. It breaks the very order of living. The strategic consequences are immediate. Western Europe's map is redrawn. Germany occupies the Atlantic and Channel coasts and installs the Vichy regime in the south. Britain loses its continental partner and must stand alone, leading to the Battle of Britain. Blitzkrieg becomes a new standard for mechanized war. Every remaining army must learn to fight fast, deep, and to protect its information network. The longer legacy is memory. France carries the wound of a defeat out of proportion to its courage. Germany carries the illusion that speed can replace depth, an illusion that will shatter in the Soviet Union. Europe carries a lesson that new wars are born from old assumptions left uncorrected.